Yep, okay. Lance, first of all, let me just kind of introduce this by saying to the camera and the audio, my name is Jerry Gill. I'm interviewing Lance Millis. Today is August 27th, 2008. We're in the Edmond Law Library at the Oklahoma State University campus. I'm a faculty member of Oklahoma State University Library. This interview is being conducted as part of the O State Stories Project of the Oklahoma Oral History Research Program. Okay. Lance, let me just start off kind of asking questions. Lance Millis is a mascot, or Pistol Pete Mascot at Oklahoma State University. Before we get into that, I want to ask you, when did you first see Pistol Pete the mascot? And what was your impression? Do you remember?
For me, it was probably in high school. And that was really before I was connected with OSU in terms of wanting to go to school here or going to school here. And thought it was real neat and a neat representation of a university, but at that time I wasn't connected to OSU, and so it didn't mean all that much to me as it did later.
Well, Lance, maybe sort of back up a little bit too. Just give us a little bit of background of where you grew up, a little bit about yourself, and kind of before you got to Oklahoma State.
Okay, well, I'm from Bartlesville High School. I spent about 5 years of my elementary school in London, and then back to Bartlesville. So I grew up from 7th grade on in Bartlesville. Then came to OSU in 1984. What else was the question? Yeah. What else? I mean,
just growing up a little bit about yourself.
I've got one brother who's an OSU graduate also.
Older or younger?
Older brother, a year and a half older than me. Mm-hmm. Folks are from Alabama and Tennessee, but mom's an OSU graduate from 1992, so I actually got to present her and congratulate her when she got a scholarship to transfer to OSU.
So in 92?
92,
so
right.
Yeah,
1992, not 1892, as I would probably joke with her about. My degree from OSU is in Recreation Administration and Management. Mm-hmm. I also have a master's degree in Interdisciplinary Sciences and worked for OSU. I have since 1989.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to kind of guess a little bit. My questions will be what factors influenced you to come to Oklahoma State. I guess you had your older brother that influenced
my older brother
other things there.
My older brother was very talented academically, and he visited campuses all over the country, and I tagged along on some of those visits, but only because I had to, not because I wanted to. And basically, he made a decision to come to OSU because it was a good school, an engineering school, his degree's in engineering. And I think I sort of just by default decided, well, he's smart, he came to OSU, it must be a good school, I'll go to school there too. Huh. And it worked out really well for me, but I did not make a really informed or intelligent decision in terms of the process I went through back then, but I couldn't possibly have come up with a better university to attend, and the relationship I've had with OSU, I can't imagine it being similar at any other school.
Lance, apart from your Pistol Pete mascot experience, can you tell us a little bit about your OSU experience? Some things you participated in, and things you did?
I was in a fraternity, a Delta Tau Delta fraternity, and it actually happened that my freshman year, one of the guys in the house, one of the seniors, was Pistol Pete. And so from just about the very first day I got here, it was Rick Wilson, the year before Scott Petty. So Rick was Pete, and so from day one on OSU's campus, I went to the Delt house, and there's a guy loading up the Pistol Pete head, getting ready to go to an event with the Pom Pom girls, and so that caught my attention. And so I paid attention and watched what he did, and then as I got older the next year, Scott Petty, also in the fraternity, coincidentally, he was Pistol Pete the next year, and so I got to just throughout my whole college career, I was around Pistol Pete's, and I started thinking about it. Hey, that sounds like something that might be kind of cool. I could do that, and I kind of like acting crazy. I love OSU. The sports are terrific, and representing the university in general, and I knew the guys, and I knew what they did outside of the athletic events, the kinds of speaking engagements they went to, and working with alumni and those kinds of things. and sort of started to see what they did and kind of putting myself into those shoes and figuring out if it was something I thought I could do. And then I decided it was, and started working with Scott, and Scott helped me an awful lot to know the things to do and not to do in the interview, and what to expect.
Yeah, can you tell us a little about your interview process and about what you had to go through the selection?
At that time, and I'm not sure how much of this is still included in the interviews, but at that time you had to, of course, you had to try on the head and walk around and see if you looked like you knew what you were doing, if you walked like a cowboy. But mostly it was interview. Questions about your background and how you feel about OSU and how you feel about Pistol Pete, what you know about Pistol Pete, the history, Frank Eaton, and also the mascot. And so that was some of it, but then also questions like if you attended an alumni banquet and you were just sitting there in the crowd because somebody took you and the speaker recognized that you were Pistol Pete and announced to the group that you were Pistol Pete, and would you come up to the stage and say a few words? What would you say? Luckily, somebody told me that question ahead of time, so I had at least apparently reasonable answer because since I was selected. But I also had to do a pantomime because as Pistol Pete, of course, you can't talk. So not only did you have to effectively pantomime when you were in the head, but just to see how you were creative and what kinds of things you could do. And it happened that one of the people, Rick Wilson, actually was one of the judges, and I forget if he told me about it or Scott told me about it, but somebody had told me the pantomime he had done when he tried out, and so I did that. And about halfway through my pantomime, he started laughing because he realized that I was doing his pantomime. But of course, he couldn't hold it against me because it worked for him.
That's great. What years did you serve as Pete?
I was Pistol Pete in 1987-88, the one academic year. I had tried out the year previous, and at that time we had what was called Pete's Partners, and that was it was sort of some of the guys that had tried out for Pistol Pete that year, but weren't selected. But that we pulled the drum on the field, and a lot of times Pistol Pete would ride on the drum, or we were sort of helpers for him at the football games, and run crowd control and try to remove unruly cameramen when they were in Pistol Pete's way and things like that. But that was a lot of fun. Of course, I was around Pistol Pete a lot more that way, and that really helped me too. The next year when I tried out for the second time, that's when I was selected.
There was your two Petes at that time. At one time there was one an alternate, and then there were two Petes. What was the situation your year?
The year before me, Scott Petty's second year was the first year that there were two Pistol Petes, and so my year there was two Pistol Petes also.
You talking about some of the the antics of Pistol Pete and so on, but what were there some do's and don'ts that you had, some expectations that they give you?
Yes, sometimes you didn't find out the don'ts till you'd done them. And I found out a don't is don't drive a remote control vehicle with OSU flags on it around the other team huddle at basketball games while they're in a timeout. Don't do that.
Okay.
The main don't was you weren't required to keep it a secret that you were Pistol Pete, but basically you didn't want anybody during an athletic event or when you were performing to see you outside of the head. And so when we were, and of course you got to take the head off and take a break and things like that, or occasionally you have to talk to people. But so we always have to go find a secluded area outside of the stadium or someplace that you couldn't be seen by the crowd to take the head off. Dues were kind of just go to as many athletic events as you could. Obviously, the biggest ones you had to be at, but didn't really matter. We went to everything I possibly could, but there wasn't honestly it was you knew you were in trouble if you'd done a don't, but you didn't know what the don'ts were ahead of time.
And as you said earlier, you couldn't speak.
Right. That's exactly. You couldn't speak, and you had to be careful with the guns, obviously for obvious reasons, but. And some people don't know that Pistol Pete can't speak, opposing crowds and things like that, and they'll try to talk to you, and then they get frustrated because you can't talk and ask you questions, and it's hard to pantomime an answer to. So that was a challenge, but a lot of fun.
You said one of the dues was to go to as many things as you could. So let me kind of divide. There's the athletic events that you're required to go to,
right.
To go to. Then there's other personal appearances you can make. Could you sort of explain that to us, and then maybe how many total events would you make, say, in a year's time?
I think there was probably about 400 to 500 events between the two of us. So roughly 250 that we'd each done after the year was over. And I say as many events as you could. At that time, like baseball games weren't required and softball games and those kinds of things. And so those, we try to go to as many of them as we possibly could given our schedule. And of course they played during the day and classes and those kinds of things. But just about any university activity that they wanted Pistol Pete at, we'd go to those. Everything from a sit-down dinner that the hotel restaurant management group had to, oh gosh, I don't even know how many posse club or alumni, different kinds of events and things like that. And then there were kind of events that just sort of fell in your lap. Somebody's friend's kid was having a birthday and they wanted Pistol Pete to come to the party, and so we do some of those. I did a church service one time as Pistol Pete for the Salvation Army. That was kind of unique, and did bell ringing with the Salvation Army for Thanksgiving. There's all kinds of. There were some business openings and things like that. Alumni did a wedding. So a lot of times there would just be alumni that wanted to have Pistol Pete at, and they'd kind of pay your expenses to come down to drive wherever they lived or whatever, so you could go to that event. We'd have some of those.
You make about 200, 250 a year.
Right.
So did you get, that's kind of a two-part question. First of all, did you get a scholarship for being Pistol Pete?
At that time, and I don't think they called it a scholarship, there was a check that we got. It was about $150, I believe, each semester. That was, I think, to pay for books, that kind of a thing. And then, when you traveled, all the expenses were paid for. At that time, I know at some point previous to when I was Pistol Pete, Pistol Pete wasn't really sponsored by the athletic department. And so it was, there was less financial support, so the guys would have to pay for things on their own. But we were supported. Our travel was paid for. We went with the Spirit Group, and there was per diem money to pay for food and those kinds of things. Plus, we went to summer camp the summer before that, and they, T-shirts and shorts and all kinds of sportswear and equipment like that. So,
speaking of that, that's your outfit. They provide the outfit now.
Absolutely.
Yeah, could you describe a little bit of that?
Right, and it used to be Teeners. Teeners used to be the sponsor, and they just, a couple of weeks after you were selected as Pistol Pete, there'd be a date set up, and you go down to Oklahoma City and meet with them at Teeners, and they'd size you for boots and give you a free pair of boots and 3 or 4 pairs of jeans and a couple of belts and a buckle and some Western shirts, and there were somebody had those embroidered, put Pistol Pete on those. I think we had ball caps. Obviously, didn't wear those as the mascot. And the rest of the chaps, the holster and gun, and the vest, and of course the head, those were sort of passed down from Pete to Pete. I think every once in a while they sort of get old enough that somebody ended up keeping theirs, and the university bought some new ones. And in fact, I think I have the vest from when I was Pistol Pete sitting in my closet at the house.
Cool. Well, last week, was the Pistol Pete experience, what you thought it'd be? I mean, before and then looking at it afterwards?
Absolutely. I mean, I think sort of shallowly at the time, it was, I can represent the university, that'd be great, and it looks like it'd be a lot of fun. And of course, it was all those things. The most meaningful part of it is all the people that I met during that time and the connection I made with OSU as an institution, and sort of strengthened my emotional attachment to the university anyway. But that's kind of the most meaningful, is the connection with the people and the institution as a whole that develops from that. A lot of fun, a lot of meaningful stuff. I mean, we may get to it in a minute. And some of the experiences I had with kids, and some of the fun, more memorable things that are very very much etched in my memory. Also, I found out since, when people introduce me in situations that have nothing to do with OSU or with the mascot, or that I'm not expecting it, people value so highly that I was Pistol Pete that I get introduced as a former Pistol Pete all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just kind of comical to me because it's just so long ago, and I always wondered, do these people that are being told this really care? But the people that introduced me always do, so they still introduce me that way.
Speaking of kind of emotions, can you recall the first time that you were at an athletic event as Pete, your emotions and your feelings?
Yes, it was a baseball game. It was probably within a week after I'd been selected as Pistol Pete, because they do selections in April. So I think we were in the Big 12 race, and it was if I remember correctly, it was I don't remember who we were playing, but it was a nationally televised baseball game back then. So back in the 80s, a televised baseball game was a pretty big deal. Of course, Robin Ventura, it was in the middle of Robin Ventura's hitting streak. So I knew there was a lot of attention to that. And the emotions I was feeling was scared to death. At the baseball field, it's not real easy to do Pistol Pete because there's just not a lot of room. And basically, you just walk up one side and then you walk down the middle aisle and interact with as many people as you can and lead cheers and those kinds of things. But the aisle's not very wide, so you're running into people and there's not much you can do, and you're kind of worried about the gun. And I hadn't done anything previously at all, so I didn't know if I was doing it right or not. And I know everybody's looking at me, and I figure I'm stepping on people's toes, and I'm hoping the camera's on me, but I'm also hoping the camera's not on me. So the emotion I remember was excited but scared to death that I was going to do something dumb and it was going to be on TV.
Oh, gosh.
Little did I know later on I'd be hoping to do things that were dumb to be on TV.
We were talking about a baseball game, but what did you have a favorite sport that you enjoyed being?
Wrestling.
Wrestling.
That was John Smith's. That was at the end of the 86, 87 school year was when I did baseball. And then I was Pistol Pete 87, 88, which was John Smith's senior year.
Mm-hmm.
And it happens that I had just that year in general. Thurman Thomas the senior year, Barry Sanders sophomore year. John Smith was on the wrestling team, lighting the world on fire. John Starks was on the basketball team. Liz Brown was on the women's basketball team. Robin Ventura was on the baseball team. Kenny Monday was around too. Scott Verplank was on the golf team. So it was just a huge year in OSU sports history, and I just lucked into being around that year. But wrestling was my favorite, and the most memorable thing about that, besides getting to watch John wrestle all the time, was how mad the crowd got at me because I was into the match as much as they were. And to be able to see the match, I was always blocking somebody's view. And so I was always having to move around so that I was out of everybody's way and they wouldn't get too mad at me, but I still got to watch John's wrestling matches. So, yeah, wrestling was the greatest. It still is, obviously.
Well, Lance, in addition to people saying you're a former Pete, they all tell me, said Lance Millis knows more about Frank Eaton, Frank Pistol Pete Eaton, than anyone else. Briefly, but I mean, just what do you remember most the characteristics about Frank Eaton?
The fact that he was a cowboy through and through, and he was really kind of a throwback. I mean, he was a cowboy when there really weren't cowboys around anymore. And he, 1950s, he's still wearing his gun and holster, and his gun's loaded, and he's, pulling his gun and shooting off, rounds when he gets excited about something. And he dressed the part. He's, totally. Obviously, now, just for the record, I was not around in the 50s, but and all the research I did and the people I talked to, and he was just a cowboy, and you could tell he was a cowboy, and he looked like he fit in the Old West, and people driving around in cars and not. Still cowboys around Oklahoma, but not the way Frank did it. It's to me, once I started studying the history of Frank Eaton and the timing and things like that, he was born in 1860, and so that's a long time ago. That's cowboys sort of in the Wild West. But then he lived until 1957, 1958, and wait a minute, that's just a few years before I was born. And so to me, that just brought history so much closer to me personally. And then obviously, kicking around the same areas that he did and talking to people that knew him and saw him do this and saw him do that. Not only did it obviously bring me closer and more knowledgeable about him and his legend and his history, but also just generally to history, the history of the Wild West, and that it's not so far removed from even the present day.
Isn't it interesting that he died in 58? 58's first year we had the Pistol Pete Mascots.
That's right.
Interesting. You talking about some of the characteristics of Pete? Were some of those you tried to emulate, that you tried to display when you're out in the field as being Pistol Pete?
Mostly they were physical traits that I tried to emulate, and he, of course, the cowboy's bow-legged, so I tried to emulate that, and I think a lot more of what I did was kind of caricature of a cowboy and trying to make sure I looked like a cowboy in my movements and my mannerisms and the actions I did, so I didn't just look like some kid with a cowboy hat on and boots doing rah-rah at a football game. So I tried to do Western kinds of things and cowboy kinds of activities instead of, rah-rah. And now it's not easy to do that, but of course now my example earlier, driving a remote control vehicle around the other team's huddle at halftime wasn't very cowboy-like.
It's kind of that swagger.
Absolutely. And two, it's everybody says, well, how do you get the bow-legged thing if you're not bow-legged to begin with? Well, if you put cowboy boots on and all the gear and you put a 45-pound head on your shoulders, apparently you just walk bow-legged then anyway. It doesn't matter if you intend to or not. That's just how it works.
That's great. Well, Lance, you had a chance to observe a lot of other mascots when you were there. Did it make a difference for you? I mean, knowing that Pistol Pete was a character of a real live person as opposed to Herbie Husker or someone like that. How did that work out?
Well, incidentally, all of us think we were the best one ever, and I'm right about that. Everybody else isn't, but all the Petes think they're the best one ever. Most of the research that I did on Frank Eaton was after I was Pistol Pete, after I was out of school, and so. Usually it was through working with guys that were trying out after me. And in the few years that I judged, I would work with them on knowing the history, not only so that they could tell the story, because people would always ask them the story, so that they would know the character and they would know the history of the man that they were portraying. It's not just a mascot that OSU chose because it picked a picture out of a book and that's cool, and we're the Horned Frogs. It's something that has to do with the history of this part of the country, and that a real life man was the model for it, and his family still lives, and it means a lot more than just the mascot for other universities. It's connected to the truth and the true history of this part of the country, and so those are the kinds of things I tried to impress on the guys so that they would just understand it a little bit better and sort of try to portray that in however their personality fit with Pistol Pete, but also try to portray that in their actions as being Pete. Of course, I knew the story. Every time you try out, you got to go back over the book real quick, make sure you know all the facts in case somebody in the interview asks you some obscure fact. And that got worse once I started doing my research and I was doing tryouts, because I'd of course always ask them some obscure fact to see if they knew it.
Did you have some memorable moments that stood out more than others in your years, Pete?
Well, I said the most meaningful was probably when a young man, it was during baseball season. It was actually the end of when I was Pistol Pete the following year, 87, 88, the 88 baseball season. And it was a young man from Tulsa who had leukemia. And apparently he had gone on a couple of Make-A-Wish trip, and he'd just gotten back from meeting the president. And somebody with the organization was talking to him about that trip, and he was thanking them and telling them how wonderful it was. And apparently at the end of it, he said, that was really cool meeting the president, but who I really want to meet is Pistol Pete. And so he came over and they got him tickets to the game, and I got to go down on the field and play catch with him and kind of go with him and help him get some autographs from some of the baseball players. And then he wrote me a real neat thank you note that I've still got today, thanking me for meeting with him, and you're my best friend, Pistol Pete, I love you, that kind of thing. And of course he had leukemia, and I never did hear what happened to him, but that was pretty meaningful. The OSU went to the Sun Bowl, the football team that year. I was actually Coach Gundy's junior year. He wasn't coach then, obviously. He was quarterback, but that was went to the Sun Bowl, and it was 70 degrees the day before the Sun Bowl, and it snowed at the game. And in fact, that during that game, from halftime, I borrowed somebody's cell phone, and back then hardly anybody had cell phones, and proposed to my wife over by cell phone at the time. So
at halftime of the Sun Bowl game.
Yeah.
Great story.
Yep.
So Linda said yes, obviously.
Yeah. Of course, I had an idea that she might say yes to begin with, but yeah. Yeah.
That's great. Well, you talk about the young child. Did you enjoy working with children? You always notice that where Pete goes, there's a flock of kids around him.
Oh, the kids were awesome. It was like the Pied Piper, just a magnet for the kids. They were chasing you. And honestly, what my mind was focused on with the kids was don't step on one of them because you can't see anything. Because really all you can see is two circles out here and then there's a circle down here you can kind of see down.
Mm-hmm.
And at baseball games it was particularly bad because they'd follow you. Like you'd be walking to a Pete and they'd be behind you. Of course, you had no idea. So somebody yelled at you, you need to stop, turn around, or you want to go back the other direction. If you weren't careful, you stop and turn around and run over somebody. And then there's Pistol Pete just made a kid cry, and that's not a good thing. But yeah, they were. Oh, I couldn't count how many photographs I posed for with kids and birthday parties and all kinds of events. Yeah, they would just, even kids that didn't like OSU. I mean, kids with big OU hats and shirts on would run up. You know, they'd give me a hard time, but they'd run up and they'd want to see Pistol Pete.
Did you feel a special sense of responsibility representing the university and our mascot?
Absolutely, and that's one of the things that they really impressed upon us, that it's not just you and it's not just the spirit group. It's the athletic team, it's the athletic program, it's the university, and it's all the alumni that came before you that you're representing, and you're also representing the Pistol Pete alumni, the former Petes, in everything that you do. So even when you're not wearing the head necessarily, if you're on a trip with the university, you're an ambassador for the university, and you act a certain way and treat people a certain way, and that was very much impressed upon us, how important that was.
At the time, what did it mean to you being Pistol Pete?
Oh, that's a tough question. At the time, what did it mean? Obviously, it was a lot of fun. And I think you say the things in the tryout that, oh yeah, it's going to be great to represent the university. But then when you're doing it, and there are literally 50, 60,000 people cheering and screaming or reacting to something that you did. And sometimes you can tell that you did something that, a good portion of the crowd's paying attention to and sees you're leading a cheer, or you've shot the gun or something like that. And you sort of get the idea of the scale of the impact you can have, and you sort of realize, okay, I better be careful with this because this is a lot of responsibility. I need to make sure that this is all positive and promoting OSU and not, against the other team, that kind of thing. And then too, after I got to know the Eaton family a little bit more, then I was representing that man and that family too, in everything that I did. So it was a lot of responsibility. But extremely rewarding, a lot of fun.
So now looking back, what does it mean to you now?
It's kind of an attachment that, well, first of all, it's something like that very few other people have or have experienced or have done. There's 50, 60 of us, something like that, maybe a few more than that. But in the whole history of OSU, there's only a few of us, only two of us at a time, that get to represent OSU in that way. And when you hear things like OSU's mascot was voted on ESPN, one of the best mascots in the country or something like that, that again reminds you of the kind of scale of, it's not just OSU people that are paying attention to you and seeing you. It's nationwide. It's sometimes when you're on television as mascot doing things. So it's meaningful. Representing the Eatons and Mr. Eaton, Frank Eaton, and it's also sort of the basis for my connection with the university. That absent being Pistol Pete, might have happened, but it would have just been totally different than the amount of love I have for the university and how much I care about it and why and how deep that runs.
Is there a special bond between the former Petes? You were doing that earlier. You stay in touch. And
yeah. They're and it's it could be said that most of the Pistol Petes are halfway crazy, and some of them are more than halfway crazy, and it's something to stand out among the Pistol Petes, and it seems like every time we get together, it's kind of a contest to see who can either tell the craziest story or do the craziest thing. One of the homecoming parades, you're supposed to throw candy to the kids. Somebody brought donuts, and we were throwing donuts at kids. Just crazy stuff. But yeah, the Petes, there's a bond. Absolutely, it's like a fraternity. Yeah.
you probably don't think about this way, Lance, but you left a legacy as Pistol Pete. What do you think is your legacy, and how do you want to be remembered as Pete?
You know, I'd like to think I was the best Pistol Pete. I probably wasn't. There might be somebody else that was better. I don't know who it is, but I'd like to think I was the best one. But probably more significant beyond that is the research that I did because of my involvement with Pistol Pete, the research, and then that culminated in winning the award for Frank Eaton won the Director's Award from the National Cowboy Hall of Fame. And the research I did there just really connected me with him and with history and with Oklahoma history, and again more tightly with the university and the people that I met through that process. So I'd probably want to be remembered as the Pistol Pete that really tried to share and pass on and get recognition for Frank Eaton and what he meant.
You alluded a little bit of it, maybe a little more detail. How is, looking back, you mentioned earlier that you're introduced oftentimes as a former Pistol Pete. How is
Usually they say I'm an old Pistol Pete, which I prefer former.
Okay, that's good. Well, how's that influenced your life today? I mean, looking back, how's it still influenced you, having been a former Pete?
How does it influence my life? Well, it's a huge deal to my kids. They're 4 and 7 right now, but they, every time they see Pistol Pete, Daddy, that's you. Daddy, that's you. I don't know, really, it's somebody else, but I used to do that. And we'd go to an OSU event. This is my daddy. He's Pistol Pete. I mean, it's a huge deal to them. I don't know. It's very meaningful. Very strong connection with the university. It's I don't know why, but I guess it happens so often. It's kind of comical to me, like get introduced and what a big deal it is. And I guess I understand. And if somebody else that I worked with was Pistol Pete, I'd probably introduce him that way too. But I'd kind of just soon, kind of be in the background and not everybody. Oh, look at me! I was Pistol Pete.
What are the lessons you learned from being Pete that you applied later in your life?
Gosh, Jerry, these are good questions. I'm not prepared for these kind of good questions. About being a representative of something that's bigger than you, that everything you do can either influence positively or potentially negatively people's perceptions of that institution and of you too. I don't know.
What would you tell an OSU student now who's thinking about trying out for Pete?
Do it. And I do. I actually, most years I end up talking to 1 or 2 guys that are trying out. I'm not sure how they find out that I'll talk to them, but yeah, I just kind of say, I explain the connection to the university that you're going to have, but it's probably meaningless to them. And the fun that they can have, but that it's really important, and that it is not only representing themselves in the university, they're representing those of us that did this previously, and that it means a lot to us. And I try to impress upon them the history, Frank Eaton, and what he did, and what he stood for, and the legend and history, and those kinds of things. And then I try to do like what happened to me with Rick Wilson, try to tell him as many things as I can that might come up in the interview that could help him get selected. And in fact, one of the guys this year, I spoke to him the 2 years previous. He tried out twice. Reese Gay is supposed to be this year, and I visited with him a couple years ago.
So we asked you the question, what would you tell a young man to try it out? And you said you'd say yes. Would you do it again?
Absolutely. And I would try to do more than I did, just because it was. I probably didn't realize till after I was through the impact that it can have on the kid that you went to his birthday party, or I remember guys trying out that still have a birthday card that Pistol Pete gave them when they were like 6. So this is an 18-year-old that's kept a birthday card from Pistol Pete from 12 years ago, and it was that meaningful to them. And
Lance, is there any additional things you'd like to say about your experience as Pete that maybe we missed or think would be important for someone to want to know about?
one of those stories will probably come up with somebody else. I don't know. This is sort of a more recent history, just a little anecdote. Sad. Charlie Lester was the first student to portray Pistol Pete wearing the get up in the head. He passed away. I forgot how long ago it was, but he lived in Perry, and a number of us. He was sort of the father of all of us. I mean, he's kind of the elder statesman of the Pistol Petes. But he passed away, and I was going to his funeral. And the day before it happened, I, for some reason, got this idea that wouldn't it be cool if we could have Pistol Pete there? And so I called his family to ask if that would be okay. They said it'd be fine. And what I planned was for Pistol Pete to stand actually at the burial in the cemetery, like way away from the whole ceremony, and just stand there, just kind of quietly watching, just sort of overseeing Charlie being laid to rest. And they thought that was going to be great. And so I arranged for that to happen. Well, apparently when it came to doing it, the family wanted Pistol Pete right there, up on in the ceremony. And so this guy who had just been selected as Pistol Pete, I think this was his first event to go to as Pistol Pete. It's a funeral, and he was okay, I can just stand there, that's gonna be all right. And he gets pulled into, not the ceremony of the church, but he's under the awning. He said literally his toes were over the edge of the grave, and he's right at the end of the casket, and he's in the receiving line. So, but the family's absolutely thrilled to this day with what happened, and that was meaningful to them. So it wasn't exactly what we planned, but anyway, it was a meaningful deal for Charlie Lester. So,
Well, Lance, we appreciate very much taking time to be with us. Okay. I'm going to turn it off a minute, but if you think of something while we're kind of signing the deed, let me know. We'll turn it right back on.
Okay, cool.
Lance, one final question I wanted to ask you. Tell us a little bit about, because you represented Oklahoma State University as Pete and told me what an honor and how special it was. Could you tell us a little bit about your career and how you represent Oklahoma State University since?
Okay. I graduated in '88, December of '88 officially. Lived in Red River, New Mexico, and was getting ready to change jobs. And spoke to, I think I came back for a visit for a wedding. I believe it was Scott Petty's wedding. Anyway, was talking to him, and it happened that he worked at OSU in high school and college relations. And I just mentioned to him I was looking for a job and looking to get back to civilization. And he said, well, hey, we've got a job opening in our office coming up. You ought to apply for that. So anyway, I applied, and they selected me, and so I became a university representative with the Office of High School and College Relations, which is now called the Admissions Office. But worked there for, I believe, 7 years, from '89 to '96, recruiting high school students, junior college students to the university. And actually, through doing that, learned about all the other people that had previously done that job and had gone on to work in different areas of the university. And during the course of that time, I sort of figured out that I liked doing what I was doing, recruiting, working with the students, but that I didn't want to be on the road doing it forever. And so I kind of focused my attention on academic advising. It took a few years because at the time I didn't have a master's degree, but secured a position as an academic advisor in the College of Education. Worked on and attained my master's degree while I was doing that, and then became senior counselor and now assistant director of student services for the College of Education, where I still work now.
Okay. So you've represented Oklahoma State University for how many years now?
Since 1989, so almost 19 years.
Wow. Time flies.
I still don't feel old enough to have been doing anything for that length of time, but yeah.
Thanks. Appreciate it, Lance, very much.
No problem.
And appreciate your service to the university over the years as well.
Thanks.
And that concludes the interview. And we appreciate so much, Lance.